Hello, Steve White, TrekBoy89 for Steve Arts 89. Well, IDW is celebrating a big milestone. They are publishing the 500th issue of Star Trek. They've had the license since 2007, and they actually only celebrated the 400th issue a year ago. But they're up to 500 now, and they're releasing a large size volume for the 500th issue. It's going to be 7 stories from different eras, and I mean, in the blurb on Trek Movie, they said from all your favourite eras, from Lower Decks to, Strange New Worlds or something. I'm like, why are they only naming New Trek? What about Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Enterprise, the original series, the animated series, the movies? I don't know. I've been collecting these comics along with all the other comics because I had every issue of Star Trek at some point, but I actually bought them in digital form and sold the actual physical comics, which I kind of regret some of them, but not all of them, because they literally they took up so much room. But yeah, I don't know how I feel about this, because I want to celebrate on one level, but unfortunately the last couple of years, particularly the last year, with all this huge amount of content that they've been putting out, it's probably the worst Star Trek ever. They've totally ditched all the recognisable Star Trek. There's no more Star Trek, no more Star Trek Next Generation, no more Deep Space Nine. Because for a while they were doing like year 4 of Star Trek, and they did Next Generation miniseries, but they got into just really anti-Star Trek stuff. They were doing just so many mirror universe comics because, it's not Star Trek, it's dark and it's the opposite of Star Trek, so that's what they were trying to attract in an audience. I don't know why they'd want people that hate Star Trek and don't like Star Trek to create the opposite, the anti-Star Trek, and cater to people who don't like Star Trek. But they started doing that, and then what they've done the last couple of comic titles, which are ongoing, which is why they've racked up so many titles, is they've done like Defiant, which is like just this ragtag group of rebellion Starfleet officers who are just operating outside of Starfleet and going against Starfleet, and it's not Star Trek. They've created this alternative universe of Star Trek characters and stories so they can work in. And I get that they've learned from JJ that what you do is you buy the title, the license, and then you just use the basic license, and then you just create your own universe, and then you own everything that you create in that, and you can, any merchandise, anything you get from that, any royalties, comes to you. You don't have to pay the people who created the other characters from the original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, any of that. So they've just sort of become like Discovery now, where they're just this weird Star Trek in name only, and it's all weirdly political, where like the Federation now is like the patriarchy and bad, and in Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek, the Federation and Earth were a beautiful place. We had solved all the problems, poverty, hunger, racism, bigotry, religion, all those things have been solved, and we just went out into the universe and explored, and it was the other people that had the issues, and we tried to help them or learn from them, to improve ourselves. That's what Star Trek was. But now all it is war and betrayal and sex and killing and just really basic, base, contemporary political and science fiction and drama stuff. It's just really not Star Trek. And I mean, I haven't read any of the issues in full. I've just read, samples and bits and had a look at them, and it's like, it's just not Star Trek. And I'm like, it's really sad, because some of the stuff they did was good. None of it was ever great, because even when they did the Next Generation and all that, the stories weren't really compelling, or they were very sort of simple, and it seems to be sort of a comic storybook sort of way of telling things now, where it's just really little stories and just little personal stories, and just they didn't grab me as much as some of the DC ones, but they were still good. And they did like Waypoint, which had little stories. They even did one from Phase 2. They did an story from Enterprise. They did just different eras and that. So they have explored a lot of things, but they've just fallen on the most anti-Star Trek, non-Star Trek titles to focus on and put out on a weekly basis, because they've found this audience of general science fiction fans who hated Star Trek and have now learned that, well, Star Trek is not Star Trek anymore. It's more like Star Wars or just generic sci-fi. So they've sort of attracted part of the generic sci-fi audience and sort of gotten rid of actual Star Trek fans. And I'm not sure how those numbers balance out, but I hear IDW is going to go bankrupt every year, and they haven't, but I don't think they have good sales. I don't know, but it's hard to get excited and celebrate this issue because of everything that is happening and everything's wrong with the Star Trek title being produced by them now in the last year or so. It's just kind of sad to sort of celebrate this milestone with the realization that they've just gone into the toilet. And it's not because of race or sex or anything like that. I mean, I wouldn't mind a Michael Burnham series of comics, but I'd love a Uhura series. I got the Stamets mini-series, like one shot, because it was all about him being gay. And I mean, I do want representation and diversity in comics. I'm happy that Superman's gay. But Star Trek, you can have all that, but you still have to tell Star Trek stories in a Star Trek universe and not just make it contemporary and today and dumb it down and make it political and just not allegory or anything sort of that resembles Star Trek. And, it's just a mess. So it's hard to celebrate and get excited about this. But I will buy it because there must be some older stories in there. They must feature some older characters, and that at least, I think be worth looking at.